It's time for Lefties Losing It, and they're singing again, or miming in this case. Can someone let lefty politicians know you don't have to jump on every social media trend favoured by teenage girls? You really don't, Jasmine. Now to the leftist heartland of Portland, where a bunch of activists got together, donned neon leotards and held an aerobics class outside of an ICE detention facility as a show of resistance. Of course, there was a furry there. I wish I never knew what a furry was. Now, let's hear from world-class hypocrite Sunny Hostin, one of the co-hosts of The View. And wowee, what a difference a year makes. When Biden was in power last year, she didn't want to know about the Epstein list. Indeed, she warned anybody who would listen that just being named doesn't mean you're guilty of anything. But now that Trump is in power, well, she's changed her tune. She wants to let it rip.
People were dying for this information. There was some sort of list that everybody thought was going to come out, and who's on the list. What's important for us to note is we shouldn't be repeating names that are on the list, because just because your name has, not on the list, but in the documents, just because your name is on the documents doesn't mean that you have done anything criminally irresponsible or illegal or civilly irresponsible.
Or that you were a client.
Or that you were a client. These documents, as I read them, only reflect Epstein's sexual assaults of women and his sexual behavior. So I think that...
And Ghislaine also?
And Ghislaine. And so being named in this suit does not equate to being accused of wrongdoing. And I think that is extremely important, because conspiracy theorists seem to not understand or enjoy facts.
Yes.
These are the facts.
There is a list. Trump's name is on the logs, the passenger logs of Epstein's aircraft at least 7 times. That's already been made public. I mean, of course, Trump is denying any and all allegations, but all of that information is out there. Why not just put it to rest and say, release the list?
Because she didn't even want anyone on the list named last year. Now she's red hot to go. Now, when she's not being a world-class hypocrite, Sunny Hostin is indulging in her favourite pastime of race baiting. Her race obsessions have, well, been well documented. She bleats on endlessly about white supremacy and racism. But weirdly, she opts to live in an all-white neighbourhood. And here, Sunny again claims that America is built on racism and slavery.
This is a country based on racism and slavery, and founded in it. There is systemic racism
and misogyny.
And there are people that I've never met anyone that raises their hand and says, I am racist. However, there are people that seem to be able to look the other way when it comes to racism.
Oh, she's so tiresome and ill-informed, but it wouldn't be a Sunny Hostin rant if it didn't have a segue into some Trump derangement syndrome.
So you have a president who traffics in misogyny, who traffics in xenophobia, who traffics in sexism.
And won.
And he won. And won against a black woman. So don't tell me that this country is ready for a black woman. Don't tell me this country is ready
also,
for
let's
a
face
woman.
It, Hillary Clinton was one of the most qualified people.
Now, here is Michigan State Superintendent Sue Carnell, who can't seem to answer a simple question, a question so easy that a child could answer it with ease.
How many genders are there? How many genders are there?
Different people have different beliefs on that.
Well, you can believe all you want, but science says there's 2.
Now, I want to play you a little of Bill Maher's chat with actor and comic Patton Oswalt, who thinks he's very informed, very compassionate and intelligent. He thinks he's a political animal. Turns out he's a bubble-dwelling fool who hasn't even heard of the grooming gang scandal in the UK. Somehow he missed that huge scandal where thousands of young girls were sexually abused while authorities turned a blind eye because their attackers happened to be mainly members of the Pakistani community. And gosh, we can't go around enforcing the law and being seen as racist. Watch Patton squirm here as Bill Maher schools him.
You know, grooming, the grooming scandal.
No.
See, that's a big story.
This is in the UK.
Yes, that went on from like the 80s to the present, and it wasn't a...
You're talking about the royal family.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about Pakistani men who were immigrants, who were grooming poor, impoverished white girls mostly in these things and making them into prostitutes and sex slaves and like really nasty. And if you don't understand that, and that gender apartheid is the #1 issue that you woke people should be concerned with but seem not to be, then right away we're not really seeing the world as the same way. And I think I'm seeing it much more clearly.
Yeah, but
gender apartheid should be your #1 issue. If you really care about oppression, like a lot. I'm talking about hundreds of millions of the world's women. And this is why England is having a big problem these days. Because in the interest of DEI, they are allowing practices that are so illiberal, which is the great irony. This is the least liberal thing you could be, is treating women as a second-class citizen.
He seems to think it's a big joke. As far as the grooming scandal goes, there were how many inquiries and trials stemming from that saga, and yet Patton has never heard of any of it. That bubble he exists in must be reinforced with titanium. Let's bring in documentary filmmaker and commentator Ami Horowitz. Ami, the ignorance there is profound, and from someone who is very political, very outspoken on all sorts of political and social issues, and yet he missed the UK's grooming gang scandal.
I mean, that wasn't even the biggest problem. Okay, look, I'm sure a lot of people on the left have never heard of this, right? Because the mainstream media really has been hiding that issue, shockingly. Look, that dumb mini-me didn't even know anything about Bill Maher's positions on these things. That's the crazy thing. Like, he's in the same world as Bill Maher, had no idea what Bill Maher's been saying for the last 5 to 7 years. Even more fascinating than the grooming scandal was the whole thing began, and I want to do a blow-by-blow because the whole, and I beg people,
yes, I've seen it.
Watch that, at least that portion. It's a 2-hour podcast. At least watch that like 15 minutes of it because it's so illuminating and fascinating. So he's just sitting there, and the whole thing began when he's talking about how great AOC is. And then Bill Maher responds with, well, if she gets deprogrammed, and you see his face, and he's like, what are you talking about? And Bill Maher's like, AOC is like a crazy leftist. And he goes, no, she's not. Like, he doesn't even register that AOC is on the far left. That's what's so crazy about it. And then it goes on. He's like, you know, they're talking about COVID. He's like, well, the Democratic Party is the party of science. And Bill Maher's like, no, they're not. Like, have you seen the whole thing about gender and how they refuse to acknowledge sex? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what? And he's like, well, if they do, it's because they're weaponizing it against trans people to scapegoat them. And Bill Maher, to his credit, he's like, what exactly are the trans people scapegoating for? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he couldn't come up with anything, obviously. The whole thing was crazy. Please go see it. But the best part was like, hey, no, I'm not in this leftist bubble. I read The Guardian. I kid you not. That was his response. Yeah, you know what? I read Pravda. Okay? Thank you very much.
But that's the Californian left for you. They're just so insulated from the real world and mainstream opinions across America. And that's why they get so shocked when Trump happens and he gets elected and wins quite easily. They don't know anybody who would possibly support him.